Welcome to this peer review episode of the RXP podcast, where we will be talking about Arcane Season 2, episodes 1 through 6. I'm your host, Alex, and joining me, as always, is my co-host and loving sister, Tiffany.
Man, what a show.
What a show.
What a show. What a show.
I want to say it was arcanastic, but then I feel like I'm just trying too hard to, put arcane into some sort of superlative.
I think so, because that also kind of sounds bad, because to me, that almost sounds nastic is close to nasty, when, this is,
it's kind of
nasty,
though. There's a lot of nasty things that happen.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, listen, you and I are siblings. Vi and Jinx are siblings. There's just so many. Kino and so are siblings. Name drop. I guess we should do a spoiler warning, right?
You got hold back. Let's get through the housekeeping first.
Okay.
It's just some table setting for this episode. As I mentioned at the top, we will be covering episodes 1 through 6 of Season 2. And so this is a spoiler-filled discussion, so please, if you haven't checked out the first 6 episodes, come back later, take a listen, or watch it rather, and then come back and listen to us talk about it, because we will not be holding back. Also, to give a little bit more background, we'll be talking about our history with the League of Legends IP for a little bit. I have been playing the game since 2011, Season 1. I think the most recent champion at that time was Orianna. She was on the loading screen when I joined the game. I think the first newest champion that was added after I started playing was Leona. So that's just to give you some background. I have played Teamfight Tactics. I have played Legends of Runeterra. I have tried Wild Rift. So, I'm kind of deep into it, right? I've played League in its many forms throughout the past 13 plus years. And so that just goes to show how deep I am.
You're even deeper because you didn't even mention the highlight of that. You went to Worlds this year.
Yeah, for the first time, Worlds 2024, I was able to attend in person. It was in London this year. It was a great time, and maybe some things from that experience will come into play as we talk about these first 6 episodes. But yeah, so I'm basically all over this, right? I follow esports. I play every single release. I've bought League merch.
Yes.
So whether or not you think that gives me a biased perspective, let that inform you, the listener, of my takes here. But hopefully it just goes to give you some extra background and insight to say, maybe I know a little bit of what I'm talking about when we're talking about this. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, for me, because you were playing this game and you were like, hey, I think you might like this. You should check it out too. And I was like, maybe. And ultimately, I did check it out. When I started playing, Leona was the newest champion. So a little bit after you. And I was in it for a bit, a couple years. I was in university at the time when, I was getting into it. So I had better internet when I was in my dorm room. So I did get several games in.
Yeah, those lower ping. It really matters.
Yeah, for reals. Couldn't play it really much at home. I don't even know how you survived until you went to university. But I have played a little bit. I dabbled in Teamfight Tactics, really didn't stick with it. I dabbled in Runeterra, also didn't really stick with it. I've also dabbled with the Wild Rift for a hot minute, and I'm not gonna lie, when I played Wild Rift, I was like, is this my new mode that I'm gonna be into? But I was kind of waiting for it to come to consoles. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. Just playing it on my phone didn't really feel that great. I would say for the last 5 to 8 years, I've been really more focused on the ARAM. I can't even tell you the last time I played 5s at all. And even with ARAM, ever since the last Arcane season, my ARAM has dropped significantly, but I did have a resurgence after I saw Season 1, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to get back into ARAM again after watching the 6 episodes that we've watched so far.
Yeah, and
I haven't.
They've done some cross promotion, right? Because right now ARAM does have a Burge of Progress map skin implemented.
Yeah.
It does play differently. There are random buffs you get. There's speed vents.
Oh.
And obviously the bridge is themed after the bridge between Zon and Piltover, so there's like a lot of cosmetic there. And on top of that, in celebration of the release of season 2, they did just release Mbessa as the newest champion. And I
Mm-hmm.
think currently she is free to play, so if you do log in, there's a chance you could roll into her and try her out. I have played her. I did purchase her.
Oh,
I
okay.
got a champion shard and was able to convert it, and she's definitely very interesting. I mean, the main takeaway is that she's a similar Riven, like take Riven and Callista
Mm-hmm.
and put them
Mm-hmm.
together, and then you get Mbessa, which is kind of a very reductive way to state it, but I think if you know those champions, it's a very easy way to understand. This is a champion. She's very mobile. Like, she gets around the battlefield very easily. She
Mm-hmm.
has a lot of combo weaving, so you're using ability, auto attacking, using ability, auto attacking. So it's really meant to kind of give you this combat dance, right? Like, Mbess is this warrior that really gets into the fight. So I think it's a very decent portrayal of her character as we see, as we saw the first time, right, in Arcane season 1 and now carrying into season 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so with that, we're come to the end. Like I said, this is a spoiler-filled discussion. We've wrapped up housekeeping. We're now going to get into it, the first 6 episodes. And Tiffany, I'll let you kick things off. What is the first thing you want to talk about in this show?
I honestly, I love what I see as someone who's familiar with the League of Legends universe, but you really don't need to be familiar if you don't want to be. I mean, it is vast, game has like hundreds of characters to even try and play. I think that I find joy in knowing the characters decently well. However, you really don't need to know them. I mean, I have a terrible memory because, during one of the scenes with we meet a new character this season, Isha, and her and Jinx have this little like bug competition, and when I like stared at those bugs, I was like, are those from the jungle? Like, are they or are they not? Cuz she names them, Alex.
Yeah, the names aren't, but at least the scuttle
Oh,
crab is in the
yeah.
game. But the other
Okay.
bug kind of looks like Rift Herald, but I don't think it's meant to be
Him
Rift Herald. But yes, the monsters are very similar. Because especially Vi's jacket that we see after she goes to
has
the
the
fighting pits has the
yeah.
Merc wolves on the back. So I really
Mhm.
also like that nod of like, oh yeah, look, that's another creature that's like in the universe.
Universe. Yeah. So like, but you really don't need to, but personally I find even more enjoyment, kind of reflecting back on like last season, literally this show has some of my favorite champions. And that is what also really intrigued me and brought me into this universe. I barely knew the lore playing the game. Like, I knew they had backstories. I've actually bought one of the League of Legends like books that came out recently. I still haven't read it yet, but I barely know the lore. But what I do love? I love Caitlyn. I love Heimerdinger. I love actually Jinx. Playing Jinx every once in a while is super fun. So like seeing them here has been a really good time. I have to say the way that their stories are progressing, wild. Like, there are things happening that I would not have. Seeing Jace like devolve into madness is terrifying because in the game he's like a pretty boy champion to me. Is that not the vibe that you get? Like when you're playing, I mean, he's clean cut in the game. He has his mallet. He does his thing. He speaks with authority. And suddenly now he's disheveled and like he looks confused. Victor saying that I see that you've come changed. Like, God, I did not expect him to kill Sallow. That was insane.
Yeah, I mean, as they've explained, the version of the characters we see here aren't exactly the one-to-one like versions that we see in the game, right? Because
Portrayals.
they are doing
Yeah.
this kind of like mixed universe thing of in this world, this is kind of the version of the characters that exist. And so it
Mm-hmm.
definitely is different than how they portray him in League. Because also, as a fun fact, Jace was the 100th champion added to the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, he being the man of progress, right, for Piltover, kind of pushing this hex tech, using his Mercury hammer and that idea of the transformative aspect, right, where he can use it as a hammer, but then also as a ranged weapon, right, with the shock blasts and the
Mm-hmm.
hex tech energy. It definitely is interesting because that also adds to your argument that, right, you don't need to know the game. That's the major emphasis getting into this story, is that you can enjoy Arcane seasons 1 and 2 as they are now without having touched the game. You never need to touch the game. Like, this is just good television that has a lot of interesting nods, especially with the characters, right? Because certain things,
Absolutely.
like with Singed and Work, right? They never
Yeah.
say the names of these
Yeah.
characters like in this world, but we know them as these characters from the game. And if you do have closed captions on, they do give them those names in the closed captions. So it does say like Singe says this and then Work says
Mm-hmm.
that. So it is
Mm-hmm.
kind of a fun little thing of like, oh, they've never said these names in the show yet, but it is available to you as a watcher to see it. And then if you go search that in the game, it does come up with a search result. This isn't just Vander that's been mutated, but it's like, oh, Vander becomes this character.
Yeah.
So I do enjoy that, and obviously with the game, they do take attempts at universes via the skins. So when they released season 1 of Arcane, they released a set of skins for Vi and Jinx and Caitlyn that were
Mm-hmm.
themed after their versions in the show itself. So I think that's what they're trying to take at, to say, we know them one way in the game, but there's other paths that these characters could have gone down that causes them to look different. I'm not sure if they're going to be making a skin that's themed after Jace as he is now. But that would be interesting. At least visually, it'd be fun to see like this version of him. Although they
Yeah.
did release a version of him for season 1 as well, so I'm not sure if they wanted to make another version again that's kind of him post fact. But there are some things that kind of seem to be happening behind the scenes, right? That we've seen, he's hearing these voices and there's something going on with why he's acting the way he is, right? It's not just for the fact that he wants to get rid of Hextech in this way. Something is compelling him to do so. But
Yeah.
I feel like we don't have the answers just yet as far as episode 6 is concerned.
Yeah. I just tell you that like the show, I had so many emotions with the most recent set, like episodes 4, 5, and 6. I cried watching the show because I felt so many emotions. I really feel like the first 3 episodes were kind of setting up the story, right? Like you're setting up like, oh, Victor's actually alive. Jace is, dealing with issues. You need to split up Caitlyn and Vi. Like we need to set up the conflict that's about to happen. And, they also wanted to say like, oh, we have all of our characters. Remember, we have all our characters. Because like it was interesting to me that Echo and Heimerdinger were like barely in the first set, and we didn't see them at all this time. But again, of course, they're like making room for Vander's storyline. So, there's a lot of characters here. So I get why we need to like have a little bit competing story time. But, the emotions that I felt watching the game, like the show, not the game. Like, when Vander is reminded of his like brotherly bond with Silco and Vi and Powder's mother, I was I felt so much. Especially, I don't know if this is like did we always know Vi and Powder's mother had purple hair? Like, was that new? Because
No,
like to me, I
I
was
think
like,
this is the first time they've shown her, yeah.
because I'm like, oh my god, like Jinx has blue hair and Vi has pink red hair or whatever, and their mother has purple hair. And it's
Yeah,
Alex, I didn't
they
even.
do such a great job with the kind of small details like that, where it's just even in that coloring, right? Even though you could say,
Yeah.
oh, that's simple bait, right? Like, how do you
Mm-hmm.
kind of do this derivation of having a mother and then having kind of offspring from that, in one way, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's just like this color palette swap. But also the same thing with Work, right? Because the version we see of him now is where he's not fully transformed yet, right? Like Vander
Yes.
as Warwick is still part human, but in the
Yes.
game, as people may know, right, he's full on like werewolf, right? Like he's
Yeah.
wolf in
Wolf
a
than man.
than man. And so it is interesting, right? Having that Merc Wolf jacket on Vi, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
is a little bit of a nod to that, right? Because as we saw from the experiments that Singed conducted, there was Merkwolf DNA kind of drawn, right? Like of the specimens in the test tubes, like there is a Merkwolf there. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think they do a lot of like fun nods of like, even though we can characterize the characters very directly in some cases, right? There's these small things that we're going to say. I honestly think we're going to get to the point, at least with how episode 6 ends, like Warwick is going to be fully transformed by the end of this. Like we're not going to
Yeah.
have Vander still, like we're going to lose that human part, right? That's what it seems like will be the outcome, is that human part will be lost forever, and we're going to only have like the bestial form of him.
Which is so sad. And like, which is also triggered from I cannot believe that Jace killed Victor.
Did he
Or
kill him?
what we I think he killed him. With all the ways that his followers reacted, like essentially died. It shocked me so much. And to me, I didn't expect Victor to die, obviously, because Victor is a champion in the game. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like I'm
they've done a good
subversive.
job though, kind of expanding upon that, right? Because like I said,
Yes.
it is probably just a different version of him. Like this is a different fate, a different outcome. And then also at the same time, they still kept a lot of the same nods, right? Like I remember, Victor's title in the game is the Machine Herald. And when Jinx says that line to Vi when they're kind of on the outskirts and they're talking about, this encampment and all the people following him, she legitimately uses that same exact title. He's the Machine Herald, where I'm like, man, they really do understand that. Obviously, when these champions first came out, this world wasn't as detailed as it is in Arcane, right? They did a lot of fleshing out, but they still weren't afraid to keep a lot of the same ideas and undertones that they already presented in the game. So it was fun nods for people like us, right? Of like, oh yeah, that's his title. Like it makes sense. And when Victor has a line when talking to Jace about the hex core and everything, he talks about it's the glorious evolution, and that's like one of his main lines. I think it's his pick line actually. When you select him in champion select, he talks about behold the glorious evolution. So things about like evolving humankind right past his current state is still kept in there. So we're getting a lot of saying it's lore that was already present, and yes, they're expanding upon it, so these are a lot of new details, but it is something to say these aren't like brand new creations that they're creating this show from scratch, right? Like League has had all this great detail as a foundation that they could build the show upon. So it's been appreciative to see that, to say, right, this is another example of you can have great game or stories based on video games, right? Especially if the lore is strong enough to like build a better story upon it.
Absolutely. And to me too, when Vi was like struggling, like in the first 3 episodes where Caitlyn was like offering Vi to join the Enforcers, to me, I was like, well, she's gotta, like, her tagline is that she's the Piltover Enforcer. Or I was surprised as to why she was so resistant to joining. I mean, it makes sense, right? The character, that background that she's built, it makes sense why she was resisting. But I was kind of like, oh, let's see how they turn it around and how she convinces herself to join the Enforcers. And because that's one of her titles in the game. I think just I'm just shocked. I've been shocked by a lot of things in these episodes, right? Like even with Mel when she gets like first of all, Alex, this Black Rose business, who are these people? I'm like, these people don't exist in the game, do they? Because I literally was like thrown by these dark magicians.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like it's something I want to hold back maybe for the second part where we talk about kind of the ending of the show.
Okay.
But the Black Rose is an order that exists in the League universe as well. Like that is pre-established. The actual details I'm less clear on because I haven't looked into the actual lore, but I know of the Black Rose order. People like Samira are a part of it. So there are other champions that exist within League that are tied to the Black Rose. And
Okay.
so I'm not particularly sure, but maybe it's something about the direction, because this is something I've said in the past, but maybe I'll just mention it here because it's relevant. I do want to see like League of Legends storytelling continue. I know for now they've said that this is the end of Vi and Jinx's story,
Story.
right? Like
Hmm.
this will be the end of Piltover and Zon. But I do think that they're saying that with the purpose of maybe they'll continue this as an anthology series.
Would love it. I
And
would love it.
if they do continue this, I think Noxus, with right the Medardas being from there and being a very
Hmm.
prevalent part of this story, it's a very easy bridge to say you've seen the Piltover Zahn story and kind of Noxus trying to, have an influence here. But then there's so many more characters that we can include that are from Noxus itself, and we're already laying the
The
groundwork for it.
groundwork. Hmm.
Because also with Mbessa's guard, right, her first commander,
Yes.
those rune stones, those green glowing
Yeah.
rune stones, are also very familiar of things that have existed in Noxus.
Yeah.
So that's just another piece of imagery that I feel like they're pulling so much. So I'm hopeful that stuff like the Black Rose, stuff like those rune stones, like this is very obvious to me to say, hey, you already know who Noxus is and who they are in this world. Now we can tell you its story of some of its characters, right? Because it has dozens and dozens of characters from its region that they can
Hmm.
create, and some that are very fun, right? Like obviously we have the brothers Draven and Darius themselves, so I feel like they will
Yes.
definitely make an appearance in that story. So I'm hyped for that, but maybe we'll save more of that for the next discussion.
Yeah. So like when Mel was abducted, what did you think? Like, like what was your first thought, Alex? Like, oh, she dead now. Like, was that like what? Did you think she was gonna survive whatever she was gonna like get entangled with?
No, I thought she. Well, no, as in I think she will survive, mostly because I feel like, especially with Mbessa still being around, like she's probably a key character.
Motivator
Yeah,
or
that's
character?
going to
Yeah.
be involved in Mbessa's like resolution. So I
Okay.
don't think it's like she's a character that they can just get rid of, because with how the story is progressing, I think we're gonna need Mel to be some sort of indicator to like diffuse Mbessa's ambitions. Not to
The
say
voice
that,
of reason.
yeah, not to say they'll end in her death or end in some way, but there needs to be some sort of resolution, because as far as we can see now, it doesn't seem like there is an answer, and so the only living answer for the time being is Mel. So yeah, she's in the Oculorum. I don't know what that is, that right, that's tied up with the Black Rose stuff. So that's not fully explained yet. But whatever it is, I feel like Mel will get out in some way. Who knows who helps her? Maybe she gets out on her own. But I think she's still gonna play a pivotal role in resolving all of this.
I mean, it looked like it, right? Like she's had some power surge up in there. Listen, when we heard that other voice and a shadow of a being, I literally was like, "That's her brother. That's absolutely her brother." And then I'm not gonna lie with you, Alex. Like halfway through them like reconnecting, I was like, "Wait, what if this is a mind game? What if that's not her brother?" And then it wasn't her brother, and I was like, "I see you, Arcane. I see you." But I'm enjoying every second of it. Like I didn't think it was predictable at all. I was just like very curious about what's happening. And then to see her do a power surge, like I'm very curious to see what
Yeah,
that
it's
power entails.
light. Like it's light, and I'm like, it doesn't make sense. And this is just me being stupid, but I'm like, what if she's Lux?
Alex, hold up a second. I literally was like, that looks like her light power reminded me of Lux. I didn't
Right,
think she was.
but Lux being a Demacian, it definitely doesn't make sense. So
Yeah,
like
it
from the
doesn't.
lore perspective, it definitely can't be her. But I'm like, maybe, if I'm completely ignorant about the lore of where characters come from, and I'm just like, I know who the characters are, I'm like, that's Lux, right? Like that's the
Yeah, I
conclusion.
know. What if Lux's relative was a man that Mbessa fell in love with and then had Mel? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many twists and turns that could be done, right?
Right.
Like, so I mean, let's talk about you know literally what singed Dr. Reverick, I think is what they called him in the show. he literally says the line, why else would anyone do unspeakable things but for love? And that is the crux of the entire show. Or that is to me, that is the theme of the entire show. Everyone is acting the way that they're acting. They're making the choices that they're making because they're trying to fight for the ones that they love. Like when Caitlyn started going off the rails in the first 3 episodes because, the grief of her mother passing, and then like her and Vi's relationship, but then wanting to absolutely demolish Jinx, but of course that's Vi's sister. She can't like decimate her.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where you're going with the point. Like, you started with the idea of love, and then you're just kind of like trailing
No,
off.
Everyone's in love. No, I guess I'm just like, everyone's in love. Everyone has love, and everyone's dealing with it, and they're trying to, Vander talking about don't touch my daughters. Like, everyone has someone they love. Singed, apparently. I'm really shocked by that connection. The connection of Singed. I'm assuming that's her daughter.
Yeah.
On death's door.
Honestly, it is. As you mentioned, the family relationships are kind of the crux of this, right? Like, it started with the Vi versus Jinx, right? The whole colors, the whole idea, the original splash arts of Piltover have, in Vi's splash art, like, Piltover is like orderly, and then in Jinx's splash art, Piltover is destroyed, right? It's the same general background, but it's both chaos and order. And then also, as you mentioned, right? Like, when Vi stops Vander, and when Jinx stops Vander, right, it's both because he recognizes them, and then right through the sheer power of his love for them, he ceases his assault,
his bloodthirst.
Yeah. And it's the same thing, right? Obviously, Singe's daughter in that tube, and it seemed like what he was talking about, reversing that illness, right? Because Embessa's asked her, like, what illness does she have? And obviously it's death, right? So he's looking for a way to bring her back, and maybe Singed, or maybe Warwick's experiment is the key to that, right? Like, he needs Warwick and his blood to find his
regenerative properties. Yeah,
exactly. And that's the funny thing, right? As I mentioned at the top, with Oriana being the first champion that was out, or the most recent champion released. And when we go to that chamber, as Singe is leading Caitlyn and Embessa into it, you see the little ballerina. statue. And there is ties to say that it's more than likely, in looking at that character's face in the pod, that eventually I think part of this resolution will be his daughter kind of coming into the form of Oriana herself. And so, right, which is in the image of his daughter. And so it's definitely going to be... It came full circle for me because, as I mentioned to you before, the season even came out. I think I saw some sort of promotional material. Unfortunately, I don't think Netflix should have done this, but there was a poster showing Oriana in promotion for Arcane Season 2, and I'm like, is Oriana in this? Like, I would not have expected her to be really relevant. Like, yes, there were ties already, but I'm like, is she relevant to this story, right? Because there's a lot of characters I know that will not show up, right? Like, we are not, as much as I want, getting Zach, who is, his name is an acronym for the Zon Amorphous Combatant, right? He's basically a salt flubber. And so we are not getting him. I highly doubt he is relevant to this story at all, but he does come from this setting.
Zon.
And then there's a lot of other characters, stuff like Urgot is from this setting that we're more than likely not going to get. Dr. Mundo especially, we are not going to be getting at this time. And so there's so many characters that I thought would show up before Oriana, but I guess it makes the most sense if we're keeping it like with the idea of family, right? Like that being the motivating cause of a lot of these characters' actions. It's going to make sense that we need the characters that are related to one another. So stuff like Oriana being the daughter, reformed in the image of his daughter, does make sense. And so definitely I thought that was super full circle for me to say, wow, the champion I first started playing the game that was the newest reappears in the show, right? And it brings back a lot of that nostalgia to be like, wow, yeah, this lore went back 13 years ago, folks. Like, just imagine that. Like, yeah, it might have changed over time because obviously at that time, the idea of summoners and basically these summoners calling forth the spirits of these champions to do battle for them was the lore, but they retconned that, I think, in like 2013, 2014. But the fact that that's now, a backdrop for everything goes to show, you can have these stories even from a decade plus ago that can still be made into these heartfelt, touching reenactments, right? That's especially backed up with such great animation that Fortitia's been able to do.
Oh my gosh, I know. God, the show is so good. It's phenomenal. Like, I love it. And like, can we just talk about the music real quick?
No, I mean, it won't be Will Craig. We'll have a great, like, this is a solid segment to talk about the music.
Like, the music, like, every episode has highlighted a song, and like, essentially it's been like a mini music video at the beginning of every episode, and I've loved it. I really think they've been very, intentional with the music that they pick and like how the imagery that is associated with that music, and I think it's great storytelling.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, for episode 4, which was titled Paint the Town Blue, we were talking about how I went to Worlds 2024 this year, and lo and behold, that song was the first song performed during the opening ceremony.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was not aware of it, right? I've not looked up much about Arcane or if they had announced what the soundtrack lister was for it. But I got to hear the first performance of it live, and obviously it was a bop. It was very kind of hip hop, like techno a little bit. And then seeing that in the montage of the opening of episode 4 was like, wow, this added to the symbology, the imagery, the message, right, of saying, this is the attempt to get Jinx to be the new Silco, right, to be that representative to unite Zaun against Piltover. And so it was definitely nice to have had that experience at the Worlds 2024 a few weeks ago, before Arcane came out, to hear that live. And so that was a great time, right? It was a great performance. I like the song. I just thought it was a song that they had the performer write up and perform for this. Who, little did I know, obviously Riot is thinking in 4D chess, and it was related to Arcane this whole time. So that was great to hear. And also on top of that, in that episode, I think that was the same episode where they had the bug fighting.
Yeah.
That, I don't know if you noticed, but after that bug fighting scene, like for a little bit, like it was a very soft, like maybe like a 3-second stint when they were kind of like looking at the background while Jinx was talking. They actually had a few of the notes of another world song from League, like playing in the background.
Oh, I did not realize
so
that.
I believe it was Rise. So listeners, you can double check me on this.
Oh, okay.
But if you listen to that scene, so in episode 4, after that opening montage and after the bug fighting scene, like a little bit right afterwards, you're still in the cave, like we're still on Jinx and Isha. There's a moment where they kind of look at, in the background of the cave, and you kind of see things dangling in the air. But there's these subtle few notes that I swear are the main, like, hook of Rise.
Keys.
Like,
okay.
Yeah, the main keys. Take a listen. Tell me if I'm crazy or not, but I swear it's there. And that just also goes to show, right? Like, Riot is just putting everything into this. This is years of League history getting put into this show. Even stuff like the Worlds, which is not related to the show at all, right? Like Worlds, like it was the Worlds anthem for, I believe, 2014. And for me, it was such an iconic song that when I heard those few notes, I'm like, that has to be it. So listeners, let me know if I'm wrong. Let me know if I'm full of it, or if I'm just the most, keen, sensitive listener where I'm like, man, that guy knows it and no one else is talking about it. Prove me wrong or otherwise.
Okay.
But yeah, so, and that's the only thing I noticed. I don't have any other like profound recognition of like, man, episode 5, minute 39, like just hear that key, like that's definitely this. No.
Yeah, we're like off the cuff on this one. Probably, right. I'm sorry if you all find this disorganized, but I'm literally trying to talk about things I want to talk about. Because this show is so good. We could probably go on for like hours just dissecting what we noticed. But, Heavy as the Crown showed up. and it wasn't even like the first episode. I can't remember which episode it showed up in, but it was very apt. I think that it's just making great. The showrunners are just making great shots with this one. And I'm going to be honest with you, like, you know, we hope that this turns into an anthology series because League of Legends is such a breadth of lore and characters. I really thought in my mind they would have, I don't know why, I guess I would have thought that they would have kept the word arcane and, like, you know, coloned another character story or something, even though this is straight up just Arcane of League of Legends story. So, you know, really the word arcane would probably be replaced for other people's stories. The most recent episode 6, mentioned, I think, was it Victor that said, like, did you see the arcane? Or Jace said that. So I was like, oh, whoa. So arcane is straight up, like, really tied into this. So I don't think we'll see that title again. That's just an aside that I thought that could have really, you know, tied in the different series together for audience of people who don't really know it's, you know, the lore or anything. Do you have any, like, favorite moments from the episode so far, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about crying before, and
Yeah.
I teared up at the moment where Vi meets Vander for the first time, and right, they're kind of in an embrace, and they're in that clap shroom cave, I like to call it.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's darkness, you know, Jinx turns on her lighter, which is very interesting that she doesn't clap at that moment despite them being in the clap room cave to light it up.
To light them.
Yeah, she's just using her little lighter, and maybe that's just out of kind of like disorientation, right, because of the fighting that was going on. But when Jinx locates Vander and Vi in the embrace, and, you know, Vi reaches out to Jinx, and she's like, come on, like, he's your father too.
Yeah.
And that kind of just waiting for it, and then Isha runs up too. Like, that was the most touching moment for me.
Absolutely.
That really hit me in the feels, because that's like a family moment of like, oh yeah, Vander's still in there even though we know him as Warwick. And like I said, I don't foresee a great ending for Vander's character, right? Like they're setting up that will be the biggest heartbreak of this series, right? Because since it's a Jinx Vi story, so I don't think there's going to be a happy ending there. But I guess the other moment I really enjoyed was Vi's kind of descent into madness. Yeah.
Obviously
mixed with the idea that her hair becomes black.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a loss of that identity there. And obviously, Caitlyn in episode 6 calling her kind of an angry oil slick because of her hair color. And so definitely I enjoyed that. One, it kind of ties into what we talked about before with Vi's mother, right? The purple hair. As an extension of like, oh, we have the blue and red derivation. In this case, it's Vi's hair turning black to show her kind of depression and loss of self a little bit. So maybe that was a little bit on the nose, but I kind of like those montage moments of, you don't need solid exposition, right? You don't need dialogue to show a character kind of losing themselves. It's just very easily done in this kind of like 3 to 4 minute montage of her fighting in the ring, right? It's something she did in the past, so her kind of returning to it is a little bit of when she was younger and then kind of losing herself in it, right? As also Caitlyn says, finding yourself, or not Caitlyn, when Jinx finds her, right? She's found herself at the bottom of a mug type of thing, because she's just drinking away her sorrows. So there's a lot there that I think characterization is important to show, right? You can have the heroes be heroes, right? They're saving the day, they're solving problems, but at the same time, you need the low points to characterize them to be, oh, these are humans just like everyone else, right? In this case, they're the humans that are ending up being the hero at the end of the day, but they also have those ultimate low points that show, you know, they've lost a lot, they suffer, not everything goes well for them. So I appreciate always that characterization of having lost something in order to ultimately come out on top, because, right, I feel like when you have well done stakes like that, it just makes the story more meaningful. You know,
Absolutely.
For now, right, with Victor, you know, presumably being dead at the end of episode 6, hopefully that's something that matters more, right, to the story. And so maybe it won't just be a shock value factor, right, at the end of this Act 2, and then he somehow miraculously comes back, or maybe he does, right? Like, I like
Right.
Victor as a character. There's a lot of interesting things there, right? As he talks about the glorious evolution, this combination with Hex Tech kind of helping evolve people,
Mm-hmm.
right, healing them, and so that ending with Jace just shock blasting him through the chest,
Oh
it
my
feels
god.
a little cheap, but at the same time, maybe there's something more to do with Jace as well. And so, obviously, that being the kind of the ending of episode 6, we're definitely gonna have to come straight off that. Also, the same way with Isha, supposedly sacrificing herself for the
Yeah.
Warwick. So we'll see if that comes to fruition as well. But there's a lot that I think they've set up, especially with I know we haven't gotten a lot of Heimerdinger and Echo, as you mentioned,
Yes.
in this act, especially Act 2, but they do talk about, right, the tree in
Mm-hmm.
Zon kind of suffering from the
Yes.
effects of everything going on, the experimentation. And so hopefully there's more there as well. Not to say I want the tree to die, but there's going to be a lot at stake, especially for Echo, to come back into this to say, I can't let this happen to my place I call home, right? And I think
Yes.
that's important, especially with the people he calls family there. So hopefully this all ties back neatly, but we still have another 3 episodes to get through before we can see how they wrap things up.
I mean, when you speak about how you don't really need all the dialogue in the world to get something across, like Isha doesn't even speak. And the amount of emoting that she's done throughout the last like 4 episodes has been like you know what she's thinking from her actions and the way she reacts. It was heartbreaking to actually see her like literally bawling when Jinx is like, "Get out of here." When it's the first time she meets Vander as Warwick in the jail cell, and like Isha's just like freaking out because she doesn't want to leave Jinx behind. And you can tell even before then, she really admires her, obviously, from following her around to wanting her hair dyed to be just like her. And I really like the growth of Jinx's character. Like, now that she has a little sister, she is like, she's understanding where Vi's motivations may have come from. So, like, she grew up. She wasn't just a little kid. She wasn't Silco's kid anymore. She wasn't Vander's kid anymore. She wasn't Vi's little sis anymore. She's now Isha's big sis. I can, when we talk about favorite moments, Heimerdinger's sleuthing or stealthing.
When he's in the cloak,
God, he was
Dinger.
so cute. I mean, a little bit of lightness in the episode was delightful. Right before Jace was about to also potentially shock blast him, when he came out of the sewers
The
or
vent.
whatever. But yeah, the vent. I adore Heimerdinger, and that was just so. That was just a really cute time. I mean, this is a very heavy show right now. Like, everything's super heavy, and I don't even know how they're gonna. I cannot imagine Act 3 right now, honestly.
I mean, heavy is the crown, as they say, right?
That's true.
And I feel like a lot of this heaviness comes from the fact too, and it comes across more in this show than other shows, at least that I've watched typically, in that even though it's a season 2, it really does demand you to remember a lot from season 1, right? Like this.
Gosh,
Yeah,
yes.
like this is a story that builds upon the stakes and the events of the first season so heavily.
Yes.
I know we're kind of maybe late into the episode, but I would recommend, maybe go back or at least refresh yourself on some of the plot points for season 1, right? Like, this is a show that calls itself as season 2, and it is a full season in and of itself, but it's more directly related as one continual story where I'm like, I could see this also as a like one season, like 18 episode kind of drama type of thing, as opposed to kind of breaking it apart. Like, they broke it apart mostly for production purposes, right? Obviously this takes a lot of money and time for them to produce. But in terms of the structure of the story, like, it's just, we're going straight from everything that happened in season 1 matters of all the utmost importance in season 2, and so this is definitely a long epic. And also, I feel like, as an aside, I do appreciate that these are roughly 40-minute episodes. Like, they're very consistent this season.
Yes.
I kind of like that. Like, it feels like, typically anime is about 20-21 minutes. And so obviously it's not as short as those episodes, and it's a little longer, but that gives it a little bit more runway to say or to tell one continuous story right in this 40-minute chunk. And I think it turns out great. Like they've done a very good job pacing this out across these 40-minute episodes, right? Like you get roughly 2 hours of Arcane every week if you're keeping up to it as it comes out. And I feel like that's such a easy chunk to get through, right? It feels like a short movie
Yes.
each time. And I guess in a way, I was a little bit hesitant with the first season when that released in 3 acts as well, right? 3 episodes each. And we did the peer review for that kind of all at once right after everything released. But in this case, I felt like there's a little bit more to dive into here, at least for important small things we want to cover, to break it up into at least 2 parts and to get this out to you listeners faster. But in a way, now that I look at it, I appreciate this more than I thought I would to have it in these small chunks, at least in batches, because I'm not the biggest week to week watcher. Like I'd prefer not to have to wait 4 months to watch a whole season of television or so. But these kind of condensed like 3 week period of having a batch of episodes every week, I think is a lot more gratifying, especially with how heavy they want to make the end of these episodes be.
Yeah.
With leaving you on the edge of like, man, this is the climax of this act. Like you just wait till next week to see what happens next. And I'm like, oh, please. Like I'm ready for the week to fly by so I can just watch that final episode or final set of episodes and be fulfilled, right? Because this is definitely something I don't want to delay. So
Yeah, absolutely. And even when you said the episodes, the pacing's pretty good and stuff, I agree with that. Except I'm very confused about the timeline. I'm like, are things occurring across weeks, months? Days? That's one thing that could be a little bit clearer. One moment we see Victor walking into a dump with like bums everywhere, and then the next episode or like 2 episodes later he has a commune and it looks like everyone's been living there for 3 years. So that's a little bit of maybe my only critique of the show.
That's
that
the
I can't
glorious
really,
evolution.
oh my god, they're just like speeding things up. It's snappy time. I don't even know if my mic caught my finger snapping, but that might be a little bit of a critique. The timeline seems a little bit wonky, but versus like Vi drinking herself into the depths of despair and fighting, that's a little bit more clear, right? It almost looks like that took place over a week or two, because like she's fighting, she's drinking, she's fighting, she's drinking, rinse and repeat. I would also say that the show, the pacing of the 3 acts, like I would totally agree with you that it's very nice to watch a chunk at a time. And to be honest to the listeners, very sorry. We were actually hoping to do 3 separate episodes for you guys because our first Arcane season 1 peer review kind of did so well. It's one of our best episodes on YouTube. Thank you so much. But it was recovering from something, and my voice was very haggard, so you definitely would not have wanted to listen to that. After I watched the first set of 3, I was like, we could record, or we could just
It took a lot
wait.
out of her. She was affected by the shimmer.
Oh my god, don't even say that. That sounds horrible. Man, Singed created that. I honestly thought, okay, first of all, for the longest time, I don't know why, but I thought Singed was making Urgot because of the shadows of the character, like Warwick's body, big old body. It just was like very big. So I thought he was making Urgot, and with all the things with the shimmer and the fluids, I just thought of Urgot when, the show is going on. But for it to be Warwick, honestly, I kind of like it better. Dude, when he sliced his hand, when Singe sliced his hand in the riots, I knew exactly what was happening. Like, I was like, dang. Because in the game, whenever you are, like, kind of low health, Warwick suddenly howls. And, like, I get these eyes on top of my character. And I'm like, oh my god, he's about to, like, freaking try to gank me from nowhere. So, like, seeing that in the show was really cool.
Yeah, they did a good job portraying that in-game mechanic into how he operates, right, with the bloodlust. I would say the only character that really isn't properly displayed is Singed himself. And maybe that's also because Singed in the game is a little bit of a weird design. Like he kind of is a product of a past era, or maybe Singed becomes like this in the show. Who knows? But like for now, he's not how he is because he's a very like mobility focused character in the
Mm-hmm.
game, and so him being this kind of just slow old scientist type doesn't make 100% the same sense in that case. But
Mm-hmm.
like I said, like Singed has not been updated pretty much since he came out. He was in the game. I believe he was one of the original 40 characters that the game released with. So like this man is like 15 years old in game time, like in game years.
Yeah.
So his design isn't the greatest. He hasn't really had much updates. They have changed a few of his abilities, but they're pretty much the same. So that could be something that gets changed. But yeah, everyone else, they've done a great job, at least with the champions they've introduced. And maybe with the other characters they introduced, right? Like if Oriana doesn't come into play, I'm interested to see if they include her ball. Because it's definitely kind
Yes.
of it is a pivotal part to her design. So it being of hex tech, that'll be interesting to see how that gets implemented into the show. But like I said, who knows if we'll actually get her? Maybe it's also setting up for a potential or just a nod, maybe, right? Like maybe we won't see Oriana at all in this show, but it's just to say, hey, we remember she exists. Well, this is a strong motivator for Singed, so we'll add in a
Well,
small scene.
yeah. Keep a
Yeah.
note. Keep it in the back of your mind. Yeah. Overall, man, I wholeheartedly recommend this show.
We can't go there just yet.
No,
This isn't the end of the
there's
season.
more. I'm literally like, I just gotta say it though. I gotta scream it from the rooftops, Alex. This show is so good. This show is so good. Like, I can't say enough positive things about it. The character motivations are clear. No one's making crazy choices. It's a feast for the eyes. Like the animation style is just beautiful. Music is great. The characters are, you really are like rooting for some of them, and you really want some of them. You want some of them to just spill all the secrets. Okay, I'm just like, what's the deal? Just tell us. I want to know.
Maybe the characters themselves don't know. Maybe they're still trying to find the answers.
I mean, clearly there's something going on, and Bessa wants something, and I'm like, what do you want? I want to know it. What else do you want to talk? What else do you want to talk about, Alex? You're like
Maybe
not
that.
letting me.
Well, maybe that's a question for the future. I don't know. What else do you want to go into? I still want to keep this to the first 6 episodes.
Well,
We feel like we're
absolutely.
talking a lot going beyond, but maybe we can save that for the next part as we wrap up the season and maybe look towards the future a little bit more.
I mean, the show is making me feel so many feelings right now. The characters are so good. I'm interested to see if Vi and Caitlyn ever reconcile for real. Wait, you wanted to keep to these episodes. I was surprised that Caitlyn was like, you know what? I'm gonna get with that girl. That other girl. That was a surprise to me. I don't even know her name. Does the girl even have a name?
I think it's Maddie.
Okay.
I feel like Mbessa does mention it. It's in one of the episodes when Mbessa comes to the office and she talks about how she notices
General, whatever, or
well,
lieutenant,
and
whatever.
mixing pleasure with business type of stuff.
Yeah, that girl might have also introduced herself to Vi in the first act, because she's like, "Oh, you're really an inspiration." So that was a surprise. I mean, what else did you want to talk about?
Man, what else? I mean, I don't want to glaze over a bunch of things, especially since we're breaking this season into 2 parts, but kind of looking at it too. I mean, obviously we can go over the episode title. So we have Heavy as the Crown, Watch It All Burn, Finally Got the Name Right, Paint the Town Blue, Blisters and Bedrock, and The Message Hidden Within the Pattern. And, in the very stereotypical way, right? Like all of these titles are very connected with the themes of every episode, especially with the end of the first act being Finally Got the Name Right, when Vi and Jinx kind of confront each other again for the first time after being apart for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And so her acknowledging her as Jinx, right, coming to grips with
Yeah.
saying she's no longer Powder, not having that recognition. And I think that says a lot between the dynamic between them, as well as kind of going into Act 2 and Jinx really embracing the fact that she's become this new like figurehead for Zahn, right? Like everyone wants to form support under her, and that really coming to fruition with the jailbreak, right, at Stillwater Prison,
Yes.
where once they break open all the gates and they release them before work attacks, everyone kind of just taps her on her body somewhere as they pass by, right? It's like recognition of like, we know who you are, like we appreciate this type of thing. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of these like slow moments that have come across a lot better, right? Because with the first season being so action packed, so many scenes of conflict, this one's still having that conflict, but it being much less reduced, right? Because we're kind of in that post tension era between Piltover and Zahn, right? Where it's Caitlyn trying to keep the peace while pursuing Jinx, whereas Mbessa's, trying to apply this or insert this kind of forceful, right, Noxian style leadership of saying, listen, this problem needs to get solved. We're going to use force to get it resolved, whether you like it or not, type of stuff. So it is interesting to kind of have that contrast in the episodes a little bit, or in the seasons rather. And so kind of having that Law and Order type of perspective as well. So I do think they've done a great job where this show doesn't necessarily need to be action all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I appreciate a lot the most of saying, right, the game is based around fighting. The conflict is the fight between these two city states, Zahn and Piltover, this kind of, I guess, the upper class and lower class, the have and have nots. And while the tension is always there, we don't necessarily need bloodshed all the time, right? But they're making up for it with having probably the most bloodshed we'll ever have with work on the loose. So it does balance out in some cases. And so I do like in that regard. And then also just with the way the pacing is over each individual story, I think we're getting a good distribution of having all the characters on screen. Obviously, we need to focus more on stuff like the Singe story and the Warwick and Bessa's storyline. But I feel like, especially with Act 3, once we get there, hopefully, Heimerdinger comes back, Echo comes back,
Please,
like that.
please.
Yeah, that'll be more important. And we can just get this kind of nice, at least sufficient addressing of everyone's stories. I guess we won't get there for now, but I'm a little bit hopeful we don't get closure to everything, because I do like a little bit of things being left open, but I guess we'll see if whether or not that comes to fruition.
There is one
act.
thing I was wondering with the most recent episode, or the episode 6, with with Victor dying and everyone he's healed also losing themselves. Vander or Warwick turning into like a lava version. Is there a Warwick skin that has him as like a lava werewolf?
I mean, there is Firefang work where he's like fire themed, but it's not like magma. So I don't know how directly they want to tie that in, but there is a like fire themed skin for him. Yeah.
Okay, because that's the first thing that I thought. I was like, oh, is there a fire skin? Because like even that little nod would have been super cool too, if it was similar to that. Man, I was so hopeful actually that we would get Vander kind of cured. And now, who knows? Isha and him could be dead.
All right. On that note, I think that brings us to the end of this peer review. Episodes 1 through 6 of season 2 of Arcane. Thank you, listeners, for joining us for this discussion that we had between the two. Like I said, leave comments, like and subscribe. Let us know if you agree or disagree with some of our takes, or maybe let us know if we've missed some things that we probably should have talked about, whether it's like a small moment between some of the characters or maybe a small detail, especially if you're akin to League of Legends lore. Maybe there is something we missed. Hopefully not, at least nothing major. And with that, we'll see you guys in our next peer review, which will hopefully come soon after Arcane Season 2 Act 3 releases. And until then, I hope you all have a great day and take care.